Whoa! Welcome back to the studio, Ryan, A.K.A BloodShot Airbrushing, and we are back for round 3. I guess I should say I, Roman numerals, Revenge of the Fett. Well, we are going to have our revenge, well, kind of, sort of, at least take out some aggression. We've got some battle damage to do on this little helmet here. I know you're like, what helmet? I'm hiding it. You'll have to wait a minute or two, or just skip ahead, past all the nonsense. Yes, in video 1, we did the mapping out. Video 2, we did the spraying of the main layout. And now we're just going to go and tarnish that whole thing and make it look like it's been through at least a couple decades of battle. Before we do that, let me spin you around and we'll go through the tools that we'll be using today and get you guys on the same page. Oh, I know you guys have been patiently waiting. So as per usual, we're going to be using my Iwata PowerJet Pro compressor, which allows me to run 2 airbrushes simultaneously, and those 2 airbrushes are my Iwata HPC and my Iwata HPB. Main difference is cup size, needle nozzle size is pretty much comparable. It is a little smaller on the HPB, but I find the detail work is comparable. We've got the ruler, we've got paint brushes for mixing in between our urethane paints, the automotive paints, and our water-based acrylics. My Fantastik cleaning solution for my water-based acrylics. And then, of course, regular thinners for your automotive urethanes. We've got the yellow, we've got black, and we've got some silver. Again, silver in the water-based, and then my blue, brown, purple mixture, which is pre-mixed. And that gives me a very nice shadow tone. Rocking on, we've got pencils and erasers. We're not going to use many of those today. We've got the X-Acto knife, which we're really using for some scraping later on the road, I'm sure. Q-tips for cleaning, paper towel, same sort of purpose, and some detail paint brushes. Now, these guys you can see are for fine details, and you might say, what are you going to do with that haggard brush? But you'd be surprised what I get out of a brush that is this beat up when we are doing our damage effect. Alright, moving on. Let's just get this out of the way. Are you ready for it? Are you ready for it? Your first glimpse of the helmet. All unmasked, unraveled. We still got some tones and shadows to do down there. But, look at all these little, peeling problems, which on any other project I would definitely consider them problems. I think Bob Ross will be proud because we're going to call these happy little accidents, and we're just going to leave those. We're actually going to embellish them a little bit. But I did notice that I forgot the little chrome piece, so I'm going to quickly blast that in there, get that done before we go any further. And I think what the Jawas were trying to say is mask it to avoid any overspray. And this can be achieved with a simple skirt, as you see here. And I just cut a simple square, taped it down and stuck her in place. And moving on to our dark color. Again, this is my blue, purple, brown mixture. And using my circle shield, just blasting in once it gets the paint going. Ever so carefully, just hitting the circle that you want on there. If you're a little shaky, you can always tape off the other circles next to it so you don't get any overspray. And struggling to hold the helmet in place, but we nailed her down. And again, just hitting that one hole. And I noticed we didn't get it as black as I wanted, so I'm going to go over it again, darken it up. And now we're going to take the same size circle that we used for the shape, and we're just going to drag that down just a little bit and spray a little bit of a dark tone, and that's going to give us a brighter highlight edge that is saved, and that will give you a bit of a 3D effect. Help with the optical illusion we are trying to achieve. And once we've got the tape all peeled back, we are ready for the next step in this little unit, and that would be the final drop shadows. So with the piece I saved, I'm going to easily but cautiously stick it down in place, and we're just gonna add a bit of a drop shadow. As you can see, and what I recommend is I always make a couple passes with just air, kind of make sure I'm in the right direction before I add my paint, and then nice light layers. There's some cases, man, you can hardly even see the paint being applied. And then we're just gonna do a little bit of staining to make it look weathered, like there's some vapors coming out of this thing and it's been leaking and leaving behind a snail trail of dried up carbon dioxide, monoxide, whatever this guy actually exhales. And some tones. Again, we want to make it look like this helmet's sort of sunken in the cheek area, and we're gonna only be able to do that by shadowing and highlighting. And here we had the tape peel up a little bit of the black that we laid down, so we're just gonna quickly go back over that and punch that in so it's nice and dark, and back in on the other side with the same tones and highlights. You can see the highlights previously done to make this flat surface look, well, not flat. And actually it's not flat, it's convex. So we're gonna make this convex surface look concave. Big words. Breaking out the good old Webster's dictionary on that one. And adding a little bit more tones for the battle damage, some dents, and some shadows that you can't see because my horrible camera angles, but we'll just move on. And back in with some highlights, and using my business card as just a quick shield. Here you see me blasting in a little bit of highlights, and we'll do both sides, and it got a little strong. So that's something that I do quite frequently, is I'll just use my finger and just sort of wipe it down, and it takes off a bit of paint and kind of tones down the highlight that you put on there. You can do that with most colors as long as they're applied lightly, light even tones, and you got more room for corrections. Yes, light layers over multiple passes. This is the way. And here we go with the shadows. Just again trying to bring this whole thing to make it a little more realistic, a little more 3D. And the best way to do that is by playing with the lights, so that again this relatively flat surface now looks like it's got some depth. And it's a slow process. No sense rushing through it. We will do a bit of real time so you guys can see how I do, what I do, and what you too can achieve. And now I'm going back into some of these areas that we had previously darkened in the layout process, because keep in mind when you're doing the initial layout process, you're looking at peeling sections, spraying in some colors and tones, and then masking them back off and under the next section, so you don't necessarily see how everything sits in relation to one another. So this is your opportunity. Once you have it all peeled back, you can go back in with some shadows, make them a little bolder, punch some highlights, make them a little brighter, and really work those 3D effects. This is the way. Yes, this is the way. But before I get too carried away, I'm gonna mask off and spray these yellow stripes. Now, when trying to get tape to bend around one of these curves, sometimes you'll notice the tape just don't bend that way. That's where you can start fold and creasing the tape. And for an extra precautionary measure, you can just slap on a couple other little pieces of tape there just to make sure that that paint doesn't seep into those creases and crevices. And now we're moving into the urethane paints, which again we'll use the urethane thinners to thin out and blast it on in. We're gonna go old school, and what better way to make the paint look like it's scratched and chipped than to scratch and chip it. So I'm just using an old piece of, I don't even know, man, this stuff is really old. I'm gonna say at least 240, probably maybe even 120 grit sandpaper. Something that's got a bit of bite to it, and we're just gonna start chomping away at some of these edges. scraping and scratching away.
And that's going to remove a bit of paint.
And you can go a little heavier on some of these edges. Get rid of that hard line feel. Make it look like it's been through a thing or two. Been around for some time.
And what better way to weather something than to actually weather it?
Yes, indeed. And now we're moving from the 240 grit to what was a piece of 80 grit. It's pretty old, but this will give us some deeper scratches. Quickly clean it.
All right, now let's do some chip paint. And this is where I'm going to use some of these stencils. And we're going to start making it look like we got some primer being revealed underneath all of this paint.
And for this primer color, I've just simply mixed a bit of white with a bit of black, and this gives me some good coverage power, and that also gives me that primer gray.
Now you don't want all your shapes to look the same, so you can overlap a couple of these.
Now you don't want to get in the habit of spraying the same shape over and over. You kind of want this to be organic. It gives it more of a realistic feel. And we're going to cut out a custom blast for the iconic mark that goes along with this helmet. Oops, I ripped out a little part there, but that's okay. We'll make it work.
Now we're going to kick this right into here.
And on the bigger shapes here, we're just going to blast the primer color into the edges. We still need that metal look underneath the primer. And there's no point putting a bunch of paint there. We're also going to extend it out with some scratches, make it look like the ricochet kind of went further on down the helmet.
Couple more indiscriminate rock chips.
And basically just have fun with it.
Do this one right here. A little bit of overspray. I'm going to have to go back in with black. That's okay.
And this is why we shouldn't rush things for the camera or for any reason. That primer gray is not the same tone as the black, so I will have to go back in and fix it, make it right.
Again, I don't want to go too crazy with this. I really want to keep some of these colors. I want this thing to still look like it's a pretty epic looking helmet. If we go too crazy with all this damage, we'll actually start losing the look of the helmet, even though the original helmet has a ton of damage. We don't want to go too crazy with it.
Yeah, we're already all stocked up on crazy here. I think you guys get the gist of it. So we're going to move forward onto the silver, and here we are using my urethane paint, and we were using the water-based acrylics for the primer color. And there's a reason why I'm mixing them, and you can kind of see that I am indeed mixing it a little bit on the surface. And the urethane paint will kind of eat away at the water-based paint underneath it a little bit. So you'll see me kind of blast on a little bit of silver, and then move over to another area and hit that with some silver, saving some of the primer color to the edge. And then we'll move back once the urethane paint has had a little bit of an opportunity to sort of eat away at that water-based paint underneath it. And once we start mixing the two, then we really get sort of a beat up, pitted kind of metal effect. And if I ever make my way back around here, you can kind of see what I'm talking about, like so. And we'll just continue on with all of our little areas, filling it in, letting it sort of do its chemical process, and then going back and using that to our advantage. Now you can see I've kind of gone ahead and done some other areas of the helmet, and when you see me doing these sort of sweeping passes with my brush, I'm just lightly hitting that surface. I'll even use my finger from time to time just to help pull those lines down a little further, nice and tight. And we're just gonna boogie on through the rest of this. You can kind of see I've switched up brushes now. I'm with my fine detail brush. And this way I can really work these tight lines on these fictional 3D edges. We just want to make it look like the paint is sort of chipped on that edge a little more than the rest of it. And this fine brush will sort of help us achieve that. And this is a Kafka brand scrolling brush. It's a 5.0. It's pretty tiny, one of the tinier ones you can get, and these brushes are great for holding a lot of paint and getting some nice specific lines exactly where you want them. Whereas this beat up old haggard brush that I've had kicking around the studio, which spends more time mixing paint than it does applying paint. And this brush is better for more of an organic feel, a little bit more haphazard with the way it applies the paint. Now that doesn't mean you go all loosey-goosey throwing your paint down anywhere. You still want to specifically place it where you want it. But this will get you rolling.
Alright, I think I've got my battle damage. Pretty happy with that. So let's get some definition to make this look like a dent. And again,
just going in with my blue, purple, brown mixture to get some dark tones in here. And again, it's a horrible camera angle. The reflection off that silver isn't allowing you to really see how we're building up this paint. Much like we did before, we're just picking a light source and laying in our shadows in relation to that light source. Here you see me once again using my finger to wipe off a little bit of that paint, and that will help give it more of a weathered effect. And now I'm going in and blasting in some darks, just kind of make it look charred. I do apologize about the horrible camera angle. I am far from a professional cameraman. I'm just doing my best. And once you, oh, nice save. Once you record, you can't go back and redo it. You're stuck with what you got. But I'll talk you through it, as I always do. I'm not one to leave you hanging. I'm here for you. And here we've got a few little graphic details all done in black. So I do what I can with the airbrush, and then we move back to our detail paintbrush, the Kafka 5.0. Great for these small details, and the beautiful thing about these paintbrushes is they do hold a ton of paint. So you're not constantly having to go back and forth, loading up your brush with paint, coming back to your surface. You can just kind of get done what you need to get done. And another thing is these long quills act as a bit of a rudder to help steady out any shakes in your hands. Easy breezy. And we're going to blast through this section here because it's kind of tedious. And all we are doing is mapping out a sort of tooth effect in the steel here. And then as you see, I like to go back and just hit the tips of all of them just to keep it uniform. And now we are going in with a little bit of a scratching technique. Again, this will bring us a bit of a highlighted edge just to make it look like it is indeed a bit of an offset tooth pattern, and a little bit of wear and tear on some of these lines. Again, make it look weathered, make it look old, give it some damage. We don't want this thing to look like it just came out of the factory yesterday. No, sir. And probably the most important part, touch it, caress it, really get to know your surface. I was just wiping off any of the paint that was scratched and left behind. But with that said, having an intimate knowledge of your surface can't be a bad thing. And some last final graphic details done with the paintbrush, and we are going to move on to the little lights we got on the top of his little antenna, eyepiece, doohickey, whatever you want to call it. And all we are doing is once again using a circle template to blast in some white to get it nice and bright with some hard edges for the light, and then going in with freehand just to do a nice glow around it. And because these are lights, I'm going to go back in and really punch just to the center of these lights as bright of a highlight as possible. And now to get the red glowing effect, we're going to go in with a House of Color Urethane Candy Red. Now these colors are beautiful because they are crazy transparent, which allows any of the colors you sprayed underneath them to fight through, giving a really deep effect. Now I'm going to start with my outside glow and work my way inward, and the reason why I'm using that straight edge stencil business card template, whatever you want to call it, is just to keep that red glow off that 3D surface, keep it realistic, And now we're going to go back in with some white and punch it up again. We want this to be super bright. Now, I'm not going for a hard edge here. I'm going for more of a center highlight with a little bit of a glow. And lastly, back in with the red. And we're just going to ever so carefully bring it into where you're happy with it. And as you see, now we've got two glowing red lights. Bada boom, bada bang. That's how I make her sing.
Alright. That is done.
Oh shit. Nothing like adding some authentic battle damage. Ah, she looks alright.
Alright guys, that is done. All the details done. All the damage done.
This is one gnarly looking helmet, if I do say so myself.
I'm pretty happy with it. I hope you guys learned a thing or two. I'm gonna ship this off for clears, and then we'll come back and we'll do a wrap-up video once it's all been cleared.
And for that, you'll have to wait till right now. Here you go, guys. Back from the body shop with a fresh coat of clear, all nicely buffed and polished. And now you can see her in her true glory. Oh yeah, the Boba Fett. Alright guys, there you have it. Boba Fett in the flesh. Or fiberglass, sort of. Alright, until next time. Like, follow, subscribe. Thanks for coming along for the ride. If you have any questions, feel free. Drop them down in the comments. I will get back to you. And until next time, cheers. Until next time, feel free to mosey on down to the BloodShot Airbrushing website and check out the PDF French Curve downloads available now. Or feel free to cruise on by the BloodShot Spreadshirt page and grab yourself up some gear, support the cause. And don't forget guys, we've got the airbrushing hacks, airbrushing for beginners, and plenty of project tutorials. Tell the world the BloodShot Army is here to spray.